Friends, go to my second channel. The link is in the description. I really should have moved to a warmer climate, I said to no one in particular as I limped across the intersection to my townhouse. The wet April weather played a cruel trick on my arthritis. Walking down the block, I noticed a tall, overweight man standing on the steps of my house. "Can I help you with something?" He started at the sound and looked back. "Yes, I'm looking for Robert McNeil. My name is Arthur Gordon," I said, finishing his sentence. "I'm Robert McNeil. What can I do for you this sunny morning?" Arthur's eyes took in my short stature. He frowned. "I came to talk to you about my wife." I held his gaze. "Then please step back so I can unlock the door. We can discuss this inside." Arthur stepped aside and then followed me inside. "Would you like a cup of coffee? I made it before I went to get the morning paper. If so, I suggest we sit in the breakfast nook at the back of the house. The sun is pleasantly warm here at this time of day." He nodded and walked to the back of the room. I brought the coffee and sat down opposite him. "What do you want to discuss?" I asked, stirring cream and sugar into my coffee. His frown returned when he handed me an open envelope. The unsent letter was addressed to me with a stamp on the front. I took out the card and grinned. Amy had a disgusting sense of humor. It was an anniversary card. Inside it was written, "Happy 25th birthday, my dear. Love, Amy." "What does that mean, McNeil? An affair with my wife?" I chuckled. "You might as well start calling me Robert. I hope you've cleared your day, because it can take quite a long time." I took a moment to enjoy my coffee, much to Arthur's annoyance. I first met Amy about 28 years ago. I was a patrolman in the police. Several rapes were committed in the woods between the university campus and the women's dormitories. I was assigned to walk around the neighborhood in student clothes. One night I heard a scream and ran in the direction of the sound. I found two guys restraining a writhing woman while a third was pulling off her jeans. She pulled her arm free and started fighting back until one of them knocked her out. By that time, the third man had stripped her from the waist down, and his pants were pulled down to his knees. He was about to penetrate her when I threw up my leg and hit him between the legs. He groaned and fell on his side. His accomplices were too busy trying to rip off her top to notice. I hit the second man on the side of the head with my fist. When he fell, I kicked him in the ribs. I didn't notice that the last man cut her bra with a knife. When I turned to him, I saw something shiny cut off my side and waved my hand to ward it off. I pulled my gun out of the ankle holster when the guy rushed at me, fired twice from a couple of feet away. The man fell. I radioed for help. I handcuffed the man I kicked in the ribs. The one I kicked in the groin started moving until I kicked him in the balls again. The woman was conscious, but went into shock. I dressed her as best I could and held her in my arms until help arrived. The paramedics were examining her when they noticed my hand. I had a 6-inch cut between my wrist and elbow. They wrapped me up and transported me along with the woman. On the way to the hospital, she held my hand and wouldn't let go. A few weeks after the incident, the desk sergeant handed me a piece of paper. The note was from the woman I saved asking me to call her. Her name was Amy Davis, and when I called the next day, she invited me to dinner on Wednesday. Fortunately, I had the day off. I met Amy and the other two victims at a small Italian restaurant near the university. They treated me to dinner as a thank you for catching these guys. Amy lingered when the other women were leaving. She told me that she wanted to thank me especially for saving her from what other women went through. She kissed me, said that I would always be in her prayers, handed me a small packed box and told me to open it when I returned home. With that, I reached under my shirt and pulled a silver chain with a silver heart over my head. I turned it over and showed it to Arthur. It was engraved with my hero. "Amy never mentioned the attempted rape to me," said Arthur, stunned. "But the card says 25th. You said the attack was 28 years ago. You married Amy about a year after she graduated from high school. You worked in accounting together. She gave birth to your first child, Sarah, a week after the first anniversary. How do you know that?" Arthur muttered. I excused myself and went out for a minute and came back with a closed folder. I refilled our cups and opened the folder, still talking. Amy came to visit me when she was about 6 months pregnant. By that time, I was already a police detective. She asked me if I knew a good private investigator. When I asked about the reason, she said that, in her opinion, her husband was cheating on her. She said that she had quite a bit of money saved up, so I asked her to give me the details, your photo, and I'll see what I can dig up. Arthur's eyes dropped as he waited for me to continue. I think her name was Joyce. She worked for you for about 4 years. I've always wondered how long you had an affair before you met Amy. You two seemed too relaxed together to have a new romance. By the time Amy got pregnant, it had been more than 2 years, said Arthur with a happy note in his voice. How did it start? I heard rumors that Joyce thought her husband was cheating. I told her that I have a friend who works as a private investigator and will conduct an investigation inexpensively. She went for it. My friend followed her husband to a dirty bar, where he got very drunk and flirted with local cheaters. My friend paid $200 to a cheater to get a guy drunk at a nearby motel. He offered $200 more for photos of them making love to a guy. I showed Joyce the photos. Since her husband was making a lot of money, I convinced her to take a lover for revenge. My plan worked for me. We were lovers for a long time, until she suddenly quit. I pulled out a set of 6 photos from the folder and put them in front of Arthur. I showed it to Joyce. I told her that they would be sent to her husband and parents if she did not quit the company within 2 weeks. I told her never to contact you again. Arthur rubbed his forehead. The HR department said that Joyce had to quit due to family emergencies. I always thought her husband might have suspected why she was working late. Amy was pregnant, and I was afraid to disturb her. I told Amy that you had a drink after work with a mixed group of colleagues, and it didn't go any further than a playful flirtation. His questioning expression turned into a grin. I'll wipe it off his face before I'm done. Everything was quiet until a month before Sarah was born, when you were promoted to sales manager, I continued, removing the first stack of photos and laying out new ones for Arthur to look at. And you began an affair with your secretary, Dolores, or Dee, as you call her. You were so busy at the Holiday Inn with Dee that you didn't find out about your daughter's birth until late at night. By the way, Amy was doing just fine. I brought her in a patrol car when she couldn't find you. I stayed with her. By the way, Sarah is my mother's name. The grin turned into a frown. Soon after that, life turned around, and I lost sight of you for 6 months. When I started watching again, you were still filming Dee. I dropped a couple of pictures from the stack. He glances at them. My life was going great. I thought that in 5 years I would be promoted again. And then everything got better? He smiled and nodded. One afternoon, Amy called in despair and said that one of her friends had had a terrible accident. She will leave Sarah with her mother before going to a friend's house. She promised that she would call when she found out more. I was worried until she called that night. She said her friend is in critical condition with multiple injuries. She asked if I would mind if they stayed with her mother, as it was closer to the hospital and work. Her friend was going to have surgery the next day and later a course of physical therapy. She was worried because her friend was all alone, except for Amy. She said that her mother would look after the child all the time. I told her that I thought it was really touching that she had shown so much kindness to a friend, and I would be fine. Amy came home and picked up clothes for herself and the baby. She thanked me and promised to come home immediately if I needed her. I said we could see each other for lunch, and I could bring everything she needed from home to work and put it in her car so she wouldn't have to drive all the way to our house. Arthur paused, lowering his head. She cried and hugged me for it. I began to think that I had underestimated his feelings for Amy, until he raised his head with a smirk glued to it. I was as happy as a kid in a candy store. I could drop Dee off at the garage every night and spend the night making love in our bed, not in a motel or on the couch in the office. The downside was that by the time Amy returned home a few months later, Dee had started thinking about becoming the next Mrs. Arthur Gordon. He ran his fingers through his hair. It wasn't easy for me to convince her that this standard of living wouldn't exist if I divorced Amy. Alimony and child support would significantly reduce our standard of living. If she waits until my next promotion, we'll both get a big raise and travel expenses. When Amy came home, Arthur continued, looking more relaxed, she looked like the Amy I married. She was grateful for my patience while she was looking after her friend. She asked me if she could visit her friend a couple of times a week. She picked Sarah up from kindergarten and took her with her. On such evenings, they probably had dinner there and returned home late. Again, I was thrilled at the thought that Dee and I would be home for a few hours, so I calmly asked her what days she was considering. Amy suggested Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Besides, she can go shopping on Saturday if it doesn't hurt. I told her that I was fine with it, and she should probably treat her friend to dinner on Saturdays before she and Sarah return home. My life has become wonderful again. Amy and Sarah were away more often than at home. Amy hired a housekeeper to do the daily cleaning and laundry. Amy cooked in the evenings when she got home early enough, and the rest of the evenings I used takeaway food. When we were both at home, Amy would sit down and talk to me after she put Sarah to bed. She encouraged me to tell her about my work, for example, about my current project, when I would have to travel again, and when I think I would be promoted. While Arthur was talking, I returned the previous photos to the file. I pulled out a couple of new ones and slid them across the table. For a cheating husband, you seem to have stayed with Dee for a long time. Then you started dating a brunette on Thursday nights. Dee is single and in love with you. Why did you go after a married woman? The new novel seemed to me much more dangerous. Dee went on vacation. Arthur rubbed his chin, remembering the events of that time. I told her it would arouse too much suspicion if we took a 3-week vacation together. I told her that I would spend this time at work and at home. She should visit her family because we're going to spend a week together at a conference in 2 months. Dee agreed, but postponed her vacation for 2 weeks and made me promise to take her to Florida in the winter. I promised her to come to Orlando in the first week of February. She didn't know that I was supposed to attend a marketing seminar in Florida and couldn't include her on the list. Anyway, Dee was on vacation, Amy was visiting her friend. So on the way home, I stopped at a small quiet cafe to have a drink and a snack. This stunning brunette sat down next to me and ordered a drink. We talked a little bit about why we're sitting around on Thursday night. I told her that my wife visits a friend, as she does every Thursday. If I'm interested, I can meet her at the Holiday Inn, room 141, 15 minutes after she leaves. Judging by the photos, you know that I went there. I didn't know the name and I never learned it. After the first time, she met me in room 141 every Thursday night at 6. I got dressed and left. She always paid for the room, and as I said, I didn't know her name and I didn't see her car. When Dee returned, I told her that we wouldn't be able to meet on Thursday since Amy stopped going out on Thursdays for a while. A year and a half after it started, the brunette told me when we were taking a shower that the fun was over. I left and never saw her again. She was the wife of a real estate developer, I said casually. You and Dee must have had a good time in Orlando, I said, putting the photos away. Arthur seemed a little worried when I didn't provide any photos of his date in Florida. You returned to work energized. You were promoted to department head, Dee was promoted to your executive assistant, and you even had time to get Amy pregnant again. I watched as his expression changed from joyful to slightly frowning. Then life continued for you and Dee. When Amy's due date approached, she was scared, I said, watching the sudden shock on Arthur's face as my words were imprinted in his head. Amy was afraid you wouldn't be around, just like last time. I was no longer in the police force to rush her to the hospital, so I convinced her to move into my house with Sarah. Amy's mother has been living in the guest room for the last couple of weeks. By this time, when I continued the story, a blush was already rising on his neck. By that time, Sarah already had her own bedroom, and a new baby cot was added for her soon-to-arrive sister. Amy knew about it for a few months, but due to your lack of interest, she never told you that it would be a girl. Ashley was born on Saturday morning, there were no problems, and again you were nowhere to be seen. Mother and daughter did a great job. Did you know that your mother-in-law's name was Ashley? Why? Arthur shook his head slowly, gathering his thoughts. Why did Amy come to you then? What the hell does this anniversary card mean? In case you haven't figured it out yet, I said, looking Arthur in the eye, I'm Amy's friend. I was the only one who ended up in the hospital after an unsuccessful anti-illicit substances raid resulted in a shootout with a fleeing dealer and 2 of his bodyguards. I was shot 6 times from the right thigh, just above the ankle. I spent many hours on the operating table bleeding, and the bones were badly damaged. It didn't look too good for me for a couple of days, so my friend called Amy and informed her about it. I woke up in the hospital 3 days after the shooting, and Amy was the first person I saw. She visited me every day until I was discharged from the hospital. After physical therapy, it was determined that I could not return to active duty, so I was assigned a disability pension. My friend and I have become partners in private investigations. We've been watching you for years, ever since Amy first contacted me when she was pregnant with Sarah. When I told her about the brunette at the motel, she was going to divorce you until she found out she was pregnant. Then she decided that she would stay with you for the sake of the children. She said that you can provide them with a wonderful future. Amy told me she would never sleep in the same room with you again. She told me that you don't want to have anything to do with parenting. You expected them to be fed and go home before you got home. You haven't even seen them in months, and you were glad of it. Even when they got older, you weren't interested in their lives because they were girls and couldn't follow in your footsteps. When they were little, Amy told them that they were going to a special place when they came here for a night or on vacation, and you can't tell your father about it, otherwise he might stop it. As the girls got older, they realized what she meant. By the way, they call me Dad. She knew that you didn't love her or the children, but you wouldn't divorce her for fear of ruining your chances of promotion. We've been on vacation together for the last 25 years, and you've never asked where she's going or with whom. The girls have never gone anywhere with you, but they could tell you about where we've been with them. All you cared about was that Dee could live with you while Amy was away. Why do you think she called you every time before she came home? She wanted you to have time to get your mistress out of the house. That's why you've never been caught with her. After Sarah and Ashley graduated from college, Amy started living her own life. Didn't you notice that she rarely came home at night? Arthur just hung his head, realizing how little attention he had paid to his wife and how much Amy had actually known about him all these years. You and Dee make a good team for the company, I said sincerely. Your new promotion and transfer to the corporate department is wonderful. I understand Dee is going with you as a manager. And congratulations on the sale of your house. When will all this be? Everything will be completed by the end of the month. Arthur was surprised, raising his eyebrows, because I didn't know that yet. I looked at my watch. That's the point, Arthur. In about 5 minutes, 3 people will come. You will be handed the divorce papers. The other 2 are Amy's lawyer and a notary public. Amy is asking for a no-fault divorce. She wants to split the assets in half. She signed it this morning. You have to sign now, the notary will certify, and the lawyer will file an application to the court. If anyone asks about your wife, tell them that she filed for divorce without guilt because she wants to stay with her daughters and her sick mother. In about a year, marry Dee and live a happy life. I would not recommend changing Dee. She won't be as kind as Amy. The doorbell rang. Now the meaning of the photo file was clear, and I didn't expect any problems from Arthur. I opened the door and led the guests to where Arthur was sitting. The processing server did its job in a matter of seconds and left. The lawyer explained the divorce papers to Arthur and indicated where to sign them. The notary certified the signature. They left. Their work was done. I turned to Arthur and smiled. You're on your way to making your dream come true, I told him sincerely. I suggest you call Dee and tell her that she is close to becoming your wife. I think you two will do very well in the corporate world. Arthur stopped on his way out and looked at me for a minute. What would you have done if I hadn't come looking for you today? I would have called your office and invited you. With what I would have mentioned, you would have come. Arthur just nodded and left. I picked up the phone and called. Good afternoon. This is Amy Gordon. He signed it. Did you tell him that you're Ashley's father? No. He was quite gloomy when I told him about our vacations together. Plus that you and the girls practically live here. I've booked a table at Gino's. We'll repeat our first date. She purred. I'll agree if you add candles and a bed this time.